Hey students, in this discussion we are going to look at conflict theory, our other macro scale theory that we've learned about this semester, and we are going to apply it to deviance because there's more than one way to look at society, right? You have functionalism, conflict theory at the macro scale, and then symbolic interactionism at the micro scale. So let's look at deviance and conflict theory, and to do this I want to transition into the later parts of chapter 6 when it talks about crime. So there's three types of norms, right? There are mores, folkways, and laws, and crime is the type of deviance that violates a law. Laws can be extremely serious or they can be not so serious, from murder to jaywalking, for instance. So crimes are written down violations, right? If you violate this particular law, you have this particular sanction, which is also written down, okay? And the sanctions should go along with how severe the crime is. Or how not severe the crime is, okay? So with conflict theory, if you will remember to the basic definition of what that is, this is where we get the terms the haves versus the have-nots. It is not just the title of a Tyler Perry soap opera. It is a generalized term for categories of people that exist in society in unequal positions. And conflict theory is the idea that social structure is designed over time to benefit some and disadvantage others. So the haves would be those who are benefited by social structure, and the have-nots would be those who are disadvantaged by social structure. And you can have haves and have-nots on a variety of different topics. In chapter 7, we're going to look at wealth compared to poverty. So haves versus have-nots on monetary for monetary reasons. You can look at rights or voice in politics, and historically, about 100 years ago, 101 years ago now, the women's suffrage movement was successful to get social change to occur so that women had the right to vote. So haves would be males with the right to vote, white males, and the have-nots would be females and men of color. So, those with power, as we have noted in previous videos, those with power in society, or the haves, they are the ones who get to define what the laws are to begin with. They get to establish what the sanctions are to begin with. So what I want to direct you to do when you are thinking about conflict theory and crime in particular, any type of deviance really, but crime in particular, I want you to forward to, in chapter 6, to the section on categories of crime. And you will read about things like a property crime or a violent crime, corporate crimes, public order crimes. There's different categories of crimes. And for instance, the difference between a property crime and a violent crime was the perpetrator and the victim present simultaneously when the crime took place. So if I leave and go out to my parking lot and I need to move my car, drive away in my car, and it's gone, that's a robbery, a property crime, or that's a burglary or a robbery when I wasn't present. That is a property crime, and my person was not threatened in the when that crime was carried out. But if I was in my car at a stoplight, somebody jumped in, grabbed me, threw me out on the street, and drove off in my car, that's a violent crime because I was present when that particular thing happened. And so in general, that's a very, very general description, but in general, that's the difference between a property crime and a violent crime. Was the victim present and could have been physically harmed, or was physically harmed when the crime was being carried out, or was the victim not present? So that's essentially the difference there. But one of the things I want to look at in particular is corporate crimes. Please, familiarize yourself with the various types of corporate crimes, like embezzlement and money laundering and things like this. These crimes are more crimes of opportunity. Insider trading, for instance, learning about market trends before they are actually opened up and available to the general public to benefit from that knowledge. Think about the kinds of things that are identified as a corporate crime, and these are crimes of opportunity. We have to typically have a high education, occupation, and income level already in order to have any kind of opportunity to do a corporate crime typically. Whereas property crimes and violent crimes, any person could potentially commit those kinds of things in society. But if you look at the sanctions imposed on these kinds of crimes when they are committed and you are convicted of it, it really, there's a huge difference in the kinds of incarceration rates, the kinds of penalties in over and above incarceration that are imposed on an individual, and really the destructive nature of that conviction when you have a property or a violent crime conviction compared to a corporate crime conviction. For instance, I guess it's ancient Little Rock history now. We had a university president in Central Arkansas who was convicted of a corporate crime. He embezzled money from a university account that was not his yet. It had been designated as his if he had achieved a goal. Later on he was going to get that money, but he decided upon himself that he needed it now. And so he went ahead and wrote himself a check and lived off that money. But his salary was already huge. He already had a wonderful lifestyle in and of himself, but he benefited from this money before he should. That was a crime. He was convicted. He had to pay back. He was embarrassed because he was a public figure. There were all kinds of sanctions, public and private sanctions, that he suffered from this crime that he committed. But he moved out of state, and this crime might have followed him on his record. However, he is now working, he's probably retired now, but 10 years ago, he was working at another university in another state in the South, not making as much money as he did when he was the chancellor of the one that he, when he got in trouble. But that crime did not follow him enough to ruin the rest of his life and his monetary outlook on life. But with property crimes and violent crimes, that you might not have nearly as much monetary loss. Maybe, you stole a $12,000 van or something, or that's the replacement value on it. But that's a felony, and you will do time for that, or you will negotiate a plea for that. But that follows you the rest of your life. And some professions won't even take you. You can't even get into a lot of medical professions, or even some of the over-the-road trucking, things like this. You can't do certain jobs if you have that record. And those things were much less destructive, really, for society in general than, say, embezzling money from the state coffers, the taxpayers at the university. You can't own a gun, you can't vote, you can't do a whole bunch of things if you have these kinds of felony convictions. And so a lot of conflict theorists examine the sanctions that are associated with these different classifications of law to look at the discrepancies, look at the inequality that might be apparent in the structure of the legal code and the court system, for instance. But one of the things I want to talk about is in the public order crime section of chapter 6, something called a victimless crime. So in those other two scenarios that I just went through with you briefly, there were victims. Whether it was the taxpayers of the state or the people who owned the van, there were victims who were damaged by the actions of these individuals who committed the crimes. But a victimless crime, just by name, implies that there is no one that you can find who is harmed by that particular action. Some people claim that these are morality crimes, and that the people in power in a society impose their ideas of moral behavior into the criminal code. So if there is behavior that you yourself, your friends, your associates would prefer to make your own choice and engage in, too bad, it's illegal based on somebody else's ideas of morality. That's the argument that conflict theorists have over public order crimes and, in particular, victimless crimes in society. For instance, if you are growing your own marijuana for your own personal use, that is a victimless crime because marijuana is illegal in that context in Arkansas. So in some places, you can't even grow your own tomatoes for yourself because it is seen as, depriving the state of, the tax money that could go for that. Prostitution is often cited as a victimless crime. I'm not talking about human trafficking. I'm not talking about youth prostitution. I'm talking about someone such as myself who might need to make extra money. I don't have that option to do that particular activity without being illegal. Even if I have willing participants agreeing to my price, I can't do it because somebody else in the power structure says that's immoral, it should be a crime, even though we have willing participants to do that. So please start applying this knowledge that we have gained from the beginning of the semester to now, and look at these issues that we're reading about in the chapter or that I talk to you about in these lectures. Look at these issues with a critical eye. And the critical eye means you've got a whole lot of knowledge that you've gained from day one until now. And this is the kind of knowledge in college that you are supposed to carry with you. You're not in high school anymore, just memorizing stuff and spitting it out for the test and it's gone the next day. You've got to carry this knowledge with you and grow from it. Carry this class to your other classes, to your life after college, and that's how the growth process happens. So when you are reading chapter 6, keep in mind all of the statuses and roles, the connection that social institutions have to social groups, and the statuses and roles in between. Think about all of that socialization process and the micro-scale construction of reality, dramaturgical analysis of behavior. Think about all of those things as they apply to you, as they apply to the scenarios in the textbook, as they apply to movies, whatever, because you're getting more skilled now. I'm not going to say smarter, because you were pretty darn smart to begin with, but as we get knowledge, we become more skilled at applying that knowledge, and we can show our smarts a little bit more. So let's all do that, and I'll talk to you soon.